Greetings, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. We're going to do a tutorial today in MIT App Inventor that is an AI-powered application. It is called Historical Character App. Before I start this tutorial, I just want to quickly share with you a video of Steve Jobs exactly 40 years ago in 1985 predict the coming of large language models. It is quite amazing that 40 years ago he had this vision. So let me first of all share that with you and let me make sure that you can hear the video. Okay, so here's the video.
Do you know who Alexander the Great's tutor was for about 14 years? You know, Aristotle. And I read this. I became immensely jealous. And I think I would have enjoyed that a great deal. And through the miracle of the printed page, I can at least read what Aristotle wrote without an intermediary. And maybe if there's a professor, they can add to that. But at least I can go directly to the source material. And that is, of course, the foundation upon which our Western civilization is built. But I can't ask Aristotle a question. I mean, I can, but I won't get an answer. And so my hope is that in our lifetimes, we can make a tool of a new kind, of an interactive kind. And so my hope is someday, when the next Aristotle is alive, we can capture the underlying worldview of that Aristotle in a computer. And someday, some student will be able to not only read the words Aristotle wrote, but ask Aristotle a question and get an answer. And that's what I hope that we can do.
Alrighty, it is quite amazing. So let me switch to this page and let me make myself visible on the corner here. Okay, it is quite amazing that exactly 40 years ago, Steve Jobs imagined that it is possible to capture the underlying worldview of a great person like Aristotle and be able to communicate, ask questions, etc. Now, believe it or not, you can do an app like the one that he envisioned in MIT App Inventor. So I'm going to quickly share my tablet with you. This is the app that we're going to create. So in the app, you have a number of historical characters you can choose from. So here, when you click on the menu here, you have everybody, from Socrates, Aristotle, some ancient philosophers, all the way to some modern figures like Barack Obama. I'm going to actually leave this as the default Albert Einstein, and I'm going to ask Albert Einstein a question. What career should I follow in life? Okay, so I ask my question. Then I can ask here, I can get advice. And the query is going to go to a large language model like ChatGPT or Gemini. And we're going to get a response. And in the response, Albert Einstein first introduces himself. I'm Albert Einstein, theoretical physicist who developed the theory of relativity, etc. And then about the career question, it basically gives you, some responses based on the mannerism, life experiences, etc. of, in this case, Albert Einstein. So we're going to learn how to do this, and it is amazing. In 40 years, the technology became so powerful that even in a small app using App Inventor, you can create the vision of Steve Jobs. Okay. Now, how we're going to do this is so you can go to our website, which is appinventor.mit.edu. On the website, when you go to the middle of the page, there's a section where there are a lot of tutorials. And the part we want is artificial intelligence with MIT App Inventor. When you click on that, there are all these wonderful tutorials you could do. The one we're going to do is called Generative AI Historical Character Advisor App. When you click on that, you're going to come to this page. It will give you some introduction. There'll be a link to Steve Jobs' video. The link we want to click on is called resource URL. When you click on that, you'll come to the App Inventor interface, and you can OK the starter file. Now, this will take a minute. When you open the starter file, you're going to notice, first of all, on the left side is what is called the sidebar tutorial. Here we are outlining what the app challenge is. There are some setup instructions. Then there are some tutorial pages here which lead you step by step how to build the app. And then finally, there are some recommendations how you can improve your app and expand on your app by imagining some extensions. Okay. Now, because we need a lot of real estate, I'm going to quickly hide the tutorial so we have as large a working environment as possible. And I want to quickly show you that in the starter file, and let me make this tablet size. I think this will be a little bit better. The user interface in this app has already been built for you. It has, all these user interface items. One user interface item you may not have seen before is the spinner component. Let me click on that. It is basically this little menu item here where the characters, historical characters, names are listed. And observe that when you look at the elements of the spinner, it lists the names of these historical characters in some order. This order is going to become very important in a few minutes. But we have the spinner, we have the image of the characters appearing, we have a speak button, we have a question text box where the query that you're asking is going to be pasted. We have a get advice button where you can send the query to a large language model. Another response text box where the result is going to be pasted, and then a clear button. Okay, so all of these are user interfaces you're probably familiar, maybe not the spinner. And then we have non-visible components here, speech recognizer and notifier you may have done before. Chatbot is a component that you can find in the experimental section that allows you to talk to large language model that you're going to be using. Now, in this project, Gemini is listed as a default provider. Yesterday we had some difficulties with Gemini, so I'm going to just change it back to ChatGPT. That should be fine. Now let's look at also the blocks of the app. The only blocks that are given to us here are the following. First, we have a global variable called photo list, where you have a list of all the images of the historical characters. And observe Socrates, Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius, Confucius, Buddha, etc., all the way to Obama. This is a list of photographs that is in exactly the same order as the historical character names that the spinner has. Okay, we're going to establish a one-to-one correspondence between the names of these characters and their images. Therefore, listing them in order is going to prove to be very important. If at the end of the project you want to add your own personal heroes to this mix, just make sure that you write the name of the person, the new person in here, in the spinner elements, but make sure you also put in the same order the image of the new character. Okay, so we are going to start coding now. The event handlers that is going to guide this process is here listed for you. So I'm just gonna do this one by one. And observe, we're going to follow pretty much the order here. We're going to start with the speak button and go down to the other buttons. So when the speech button is clicked, when the speak button is clicked, what we want to do is we want to invoke the speech recognizer, and we're going to ask the speech recognizer to get text. Okay. So what's going to happen is your voice is going to be captured, and speech recognizer is going to send this to Google so that it can get a text of that. When the text arrives, this event handler called when speech recognizer after getting text is going to be invoked, and observe that it returns with a parameter called the result. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the question text box blocks. I'm going to get any of the getters, but it is important that you make sure the property you're trying to assign to is the text property. So we're going to set question text box dot text to the result that comes back from the speech recognizer. Okay, so this takes care of the process of the user clicking on the speak button and the response being pasted on the text box right underneath. Okay, so we have done that. Now what we're going to do is, and maybe I will move the spinner and the clear button event handlers right here just for some clarity, some space. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out what happens when the user clicks the get advice button. Now, when get advice button is clicked, what's going to happen is the text that is sitting in the question text box is going to be sent to the large language model, and you're going to give it some prompt that says something like, pretend that you're Albert Einstein and answer the following question accordingly, etc. So we're going to do that. Now, before we do that, I want to make sure that we put a notifier message. So let's go to the notifier blocks, and the block we're looking for is called show progress dialog with message title. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to notify the user that we have started the process. So I'm going to quickly put a text block here. You know probably by now that you could do Control C, Control V to copy paste a block. So the message I'm going to send to the user is generating your response. And then I'm going to ask the user basically to be patient. So please wait. Okay. So this is a good, habit every time there's a waiting period involved so that the user doesn't get confused. It's always good to invoke the notifier. Now, the important step here is we're going to go to the chatbot, and we're going to tell the chatbot, please, here's the question I want you to answer. Please converse with this question. So we're going to form a question. The question is going to have multiple parts. So I go to my text blocks and I grab a join block. And I'm going to add several more uh, sockets there. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is probably going to be enough. If I need one more, I'll just add one more. So I'm going to basically say that so we're giving instruction, a prompt to the large language model. We're going to say you are, and I put a space. Now we want to say you are, for example, Albert Einstein or Socrates, etc. So that name is selected, is indicated in the spinner selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the getter here in the spinner called spinner selection. So we're basically saying something like, you are Albert Einstein. Okay. And then we're going to say, answer the following questions. Oops. So answer the following questions as Einstein would. Okay, so I'm going to quickly add a few more slots here. Okay, I'm going to, so you are Albert Einstein, answer the following questions as Albert Einstein would. I did a copy paste there. Okay, and let me put one more socket here. Okay, as Albert Einstein would. Oops, space and would. Um, First, introduce yourself. Okay, so that way we get a little bit of information who the character is in case the user doesn't know that particular character. So I'm going to leave a space there. I'm going to add one more socket here at the very end. Now, the question is, where is this query residing? The query is residing in the question text box. So I grab any of the getters. I grab the getters, but make sure the property that you want to highlight here is the text property. Okay? So you are Albert Einstein. Answer the following questions as Albert Einstein would. First, introduce yourself, and then this is the query that we're going to send there. Okay. Now, as you refine this app, you might realize you may have to give more detailed prompts, such as you might want to warn the large language model, please don't make stuff up, etc., so that it's more responsive to your query. But right now, this is good enough. Now, when the query goes to the large language model and it returns, it's going to invoke this particular event handler here called when chatbot got response. And observe it returns with a response text. What we would like to do is first we want to dismiss the notifier. So I go to notifier blocks, I dismiss the notifier. And then what we would like to do is we would like to go to the response text box, get any of the setters, and make sure you select the text property again. We would like to paste the response coming back from the large language model to the response text box. Okay? So this completes basically a cycle. Now we have two more important blocks here to code. The first one is the clear button. So when let's say a user ask a question, they got advice, they want to clear it so they can start the process again. What we're going to do is we are going to have the clear button clear the text boxes that we were working with. So I'm going to first of all go to the question text box. I'm going to grab any of the setters here. I'm going to say, please go to question text box text and set it to the empty string. So this will make sure that our text box is cleared. Now we want to do the same thing for the response text box. Now in order to do that, I can simply come here, do a copy paste, and I can change the question text box to response text box here. So this way I am clearing both of the text box. Okay. Now, the last block that we have to do is probably the one that is a little bit complicated. That's why I left it to the end. It basically is the following. What should happen after a user selected a particular character from the spinner? Okay, so we are going to code that. Now, if you think about it, what should happen is that, first of all, you would like to clear the response text box. And let me quickly show this to you here. Now, it's possible that I ask a question to Albert Einstein, I got an advice, but what I would like to do is I would like to select another character and I would like to, ask maybe the same question. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and select another character here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to ask, the same question to, I don't know, for example, to Maya Angelou. Okay. So the question stays there. So I shouldn't clear the question text box, but I want to definitely clear the response text box so that I can get another advice this time from Maya Angelou. Okay. So that is going to happen hopefully in a second. All right, so here it is. Now let's start coding this. So I'm going to start by clearing the response text box. So I'm going to do a Control C, Control V, and copy this thing right here. It might be a good idea to have the chatbot reset a conversation. Okay, you were just having a conversation. You told chatbot you're Albert Einstein. It probably will keep thinking it's Albert Einstein. When you do a reset conversation, the large language model will basically be ready for a fresh conversation. Okay, so that's done. Now, the tricky part here is how do we change the image to be the image of the selected character? So what I do is I go to the image blocks. I grab any of the setters. So let's say I grab this one. And what I want to do is I want to find the picture property. So set image picture to. Now the question is, how are we going to find which of these photographs should I be pasting for the image? The way we're going to do that is whatever the selection was for the spinner, it should be identical in the photo list. So we are going to do that. And this is really the only tricky part here. We're going to go to the list operations. And one of the list operations is called selects list item from a given list with this index. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to click it into here. Now, the list we are dealing with, you can probably just go to the variables here and you should be able to get your variable called photo list. Okay. So we're saying, go to the photo list, select the item with the index that corresponds to the same index as was selected in the spinner. Okay. So we're going to do that in the following manner. We're going to go to the spinner blocks. And one of the blocks is here is a getter called spinner dot selection index. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to snap it into here. Okay. So this is a part that if you're having difficulty, that's kind of normal. Just go with it. Try to understand it. We're basically saying whatever the character selected in the spinner, we want to find identically the image of that character. And this is the reason why we made sure this order of the photos is exactly to the same order of characters in the spinner. Okay? Alrighty, so this is it. Believe it or not, we have all the code that we need. Now we are going to quickly do a test to make sure that everything is working fine. So I am going to, let me quickly fire up my tablet here. So we are going to generate the QR code. You must have done this before. I go to AI Companion. And I am going to quickly select my companion here. So it's this one right here. And I click on the blue button and it becomes a scanner. I scan the QR code. And when I do that, all the information that I have coded is going to be now transferred to the tablet. And then we should see the app here. Now, let's change the character from Albert Einstein to some other character. Let's say Buddha. And I want to ask the question, how do I become enlightened? Okay, so imagine that's the question we would like to ask. You click on Get Advice, and the information is going to go to large language model, in this case, ChatGPT. It's going to come up with a response and observe. First, there's an introduction. In this case, the model explains who is Buddha. And it's interesting, it starts also with a little information here, bow gently and with palms together, as Buddha would. And then there is some advice here, which basically have the Buddha talk about what is called the Noble Eightfold Path in Buddhism. Okay? So it is incredible. We are able to tap into a large language model and answer a question as if, in this case, it is Buddha. Super. This is that. Actually, before I do that, let me just quickly test two more things. Observe when I select another character here. So let's say I want to now ask a question to Sigmund Freud. The response text box cleared, even though the question text box stayed just in case I wanted to ask the same question. If you wanted to clear the question also, you just click the clear button here and everything's going to be cleared. Okay? Beautiful. Excellent job. Now, you might wonder, what wonderful, imaginative additions you could make, you could add to this app. The most obvious one that I'm going to recommend you do is add to this list of characters your own personal heroes. Of course, there needs to be enough information about your personal heroes on the internet because that's how the large language model got trained. But if you do so, make sure that you maybe put it at the very end. But whatever order you put, make sure you have the photograph of your favorite character exactly in the same order added here, okay, in the photo list. All right, so here is a wonderful, app that you can generate, and you can have wonderful extensions. We are really looking forward to all the wonderful things you guys are going to create. It's been a pleasure. All the best. Please take care.